Fishyaker.com, the original kayak rigging video series.
Hey guys, it's John Oast from Fishyaker.com. I do a lot of different types of fishing: freshwater, saltwater, small fish, larger fish, you name it. I use a lot of different type of tackle, different types of reels and rods, but let's talk a little about spinning gear. All right, I usually use spinning reels when I'm trying to throw a lighter lure, or I want to get a lot of more finesse and feel into it, so I'm using a smaller type of rod and reel combo. But what do you want to look for when you're looking to purchase a new spinning reel? A bunch of things to think about. First thing you want to consider is what kind of drag are you interested in. You're going to see reels, the majority of them, with a spool-based drag system. Sometimes you'll also see some with a frame-based drag system. Personally, my preference, I like to have the drag on top of the spool. That way, if I'm fighting a fish, I can easily see it. After I've cast it, I can look right down. Easy to manipulate it, tighten it, loosen it. A whole lot easier. I like it. It's easier to see, easier to tell, how tight or how loose a drag system is. On top of that, there's a number of other different things you want to look for. When you're looking for the drag itself, make sure it's a pretty sensitive drag system. You get what you pay for, just like we talk a lot about when it comes to products. You get what you pay for. Make sure you get a reel that has a quality drag, especially if you're going to be fighting a bigger or stronger fish, because you have a really weak drag system. It's going to be harder to land that fish. So a sensitive drag, take a look at it. See how easy it is to manipulate the drag, how sensitive it is, how tight you can get it, how loose you can get it, how finite it is, how close those clicks are together. And just feel to see if it's very, well manufactured when you're looking at the reel before you purchase it. Drag is really important. Again, if you're going to be fighting a bigger fish, you want a really strong drag system. You may still want to look at a conventional or a bait casting reel. A spinning reel may not be the key for you, because again, your spinning reels aren't always going to have as good and as strong of a drag system as your standard conventional and bait casting reels. But again, you're throwing lighter lures, lighter baits, and you want to do more finesse fishing, spinning gear is going to work. So that's your drag system. Keep in mind you have the two different locations for the drag. Like I said, the one on top of the spool is my personal preference, but take a look and see how good the drag is. A couple other things to look at. Personally, I like to have a really solid metal crank arm on it. I don't like to have a crank arm that's going to flex. So when you're taking a look at the reel before you purchase it, feel how solid that crank arm is. If you get much flex in it, much play in it, it's probably not going to be that good, especially if you're going for, again, a larger species of fish. So take a look at the crank arm. Like I said, I like to have a really strong metal crank arm. Going down the crank arm, what kind of crank arm grip do you have on it? Be careful if you get one that has a really slick, smooth, really hard type of grip on it, because a lot of that, if it's slippery now, right out of the box, you get slime, fish slime on it, sweat on it, water on it, it's a little bit harder to grip. I like to get one that's EVA foam, like this. Your higher quality reels are going to have a softer, higher quality plastic on it, or rubberized plastic. That's going to be really good. But again, your hard ones, they may even dry rot on you and get kind of scratchy and scratch up pretty good. So just take a look at what kind of grip you have on that crank arm. A couple other things to look at. Okay, what about the actual shaft, the actual frame itself? Keep in mind, for instance, here you're looking at one on the reel, on the rod. Remember, if you have a strong fish pulling on it, you're fighting it, this can be a weak point, okay? The actual connection, where it's actually getting on, connected to the rod. Remember, as you're fighting a fish, some maybe minimal, maybe more than minimal, it's going to have a little bit of flex in it. So make sure that that's a solid frame on that reel. Just like you want to have a strong crank arm, you want to make sure that the frame itself is solid. A cheap plastic reel, you're going to feel some play in it. A number of different things still. So we've talked about your drag itself. Where is the location of the drag? How good is your drag? Do you have a strong crank arm, a quality grip on it? One other thing, I personally, you're going to see plastic spools, metal spools, you name it, machine spools, anodized spools, graphite spools. There's lots of different types of spools in the market. Make sure, to me at least, when I'm looking at a reel, I like to have a metal spool. Take a look at the spool. Knock on it a little bit. Does it feel solid? Squeeze it. Does it flex much? So that's another big factor. A lot of people like oversized spools because you can take up line quicker, it'll cast easier, more line will come off the spool. But either preference you have, make sure it's a quality spool on it. Remember, you can buy spinning reels from, say, 15 or 20 bucks on up to several $100s, your preference depending on what your budget is. But remember, just starting it over really briefly, things to look for: what type of spool do you have? Is it a quality spool? How good is the drag system on it? Is the drag on the top or the bottom of the reel? Is the crank arm itself solid? Is it a quality crank grip that you have? And then how solid is the frame itself? Is there any play in it? There's a number of different things. Last but not least, look at the number of bearings in it. A lot of your inferior or really inexpensive spinning reels may only have one bearing in it. The more bearings are typically better. A lot of, so there's a few pros and cons to it too, depending on how many bearings you have. Is it easier to clean the reel, getting sand in it and so forth? But make sure you got at least a handful of bearings in it. It's going to show the quality of the reel, and you can feel it. You can feel how smooth it is the more bearings you have. When you get over, say, 5 or so bearings in it, you can't always tell the difference. But the more bearings, the higher quality the reel it typically is. And then finally, which is really probably the most important of all, do you have an anti-reverse gearing system in it? As you're reeling, okay, is there any play when you push backwards on the crank arm? You want to have a smooth motion in it. But when it stops, does it perfectly stop, or is there any backwards play in it? Remember, if you're fighting a fish, every time it starts to pull backwards on that grip, on that handle, you're going to be wearing those gears down. Also, it's kind of annoying when you're working a lure a little bit, jigging and stuff, that you're actually going to have a little bit of play in it. So try to find a reel that has automatic instant anti-reverse on it, so you can't, when you have it locked into forward. Like obviously here you can go as 2-directional, but when you lock it into just a forward direction cranking, make sure it locks immediately as soon as that crank is stopped. Okay, you don't want to have any play in it. That's a big one. So take a look at all these when you're purchasing a reel. I know it's a lot to think about, but you do find some very affordable reels on the market that have all these functions, these features in it. The one I have here is a Deadeye from Akuma, a very affordable reel, very inexpensive reel relatively. You're looking around a $50 or so reel, but it's got all these features. It's really good. So you can get reels from, say, 50 bucks or so on up to several $100s that have the features, good quality features you're looking for. These are things you want to think about, but they're really important. Make sure you buy the best reel you can for the budget you have. It'll last longer, it'll be more durable, it'll be more sensitive, and you'll get better performance out of it. Keep all these things in mind when you're going to the store looking for your next reel. Hope this tip helps you out. Be sure to subscribe to the Fishyaker YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and we'll catch you on the water. Thanks for watching.